But historically, some of the most significant constitutional crises and court decisions involving states' rights have revolved around the issue of race, like the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which had to do with maintaining the balance of power with slave states versus non-slave states in the new territories that were acquired through the Louisiana Purchase. It allowed Missouri to be admitted as a slave state as long as Maine was admitted as a non-slave-holding state. It also outlawed slavery in the new territories above the latitude line 3630. Then there was the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which basically turned the Missouri Compromise on its ear by saying that individual states should be able to decide whether or not they wanted to allow slavery. It pretty much paved the way for the Civil War. And speaking of the Civil War, the granddaddy of all racism disguised as states' rights dust-ups, I'm sure we've all heard the claim that the Civil War was really about states' rights, and it was. It was about the states' rights to own Negro slaves. The American South tried to create a whole new country over it, and lost. And then there's one of the most significant Supreme Court cases of the 20th century, Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. Multiple states thought that they should be able to segregate black and white children in schools if they wanted to because states' rights, and the Supreme Court unanimously decided against them. They said that school segregation violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. But one of the primary reasons that states' rights is basically synonymous with racism is because of something called the Southern Strategy, employed by Republicans starting in the middle of the 20th century. Their whole goal was to lure racist white Southerners to the Republican Party that had been loyal to the Democrats for over 100 years. They wanted to seize upon that faction of the Democratic Party that was hostile towards the civil rights movement and who wanted to retain segregation. Republicans like Barry Goldwater, Richard Nixon, and Ronald Reagan figured out that to appeal to this powerful voting bloc, they would have to tread pretty lightly. They couldn't use explicitly racist language, so they used coded language instead. States' rights was one of the mainstays of this new Southern strategy. When they evoked this term, it was understood that they were referring to keeping the government out of decisions around segregationist policies of the South. So to answer the question, what's so bad about states' rights? Well, in theory, nothing. At least that's how it should be. But over time, states' rights has become synonymous with racism because historically, that's exactly how it's been used. My next tour stop will be on Monday, the 11th of September in New York. Visit the link in my bio.
You know, there's a big misconception out here that black conservatism and white conservatism are somehow the same thing. If not a misconception, maybe misguided. Maybe a misguided willingness to align with white conservatives. They're nowhere near the same, despite that they may share some political and social views. But deep down, these two ideologies are fighting for very different things. And it's time to break that down for just a little bit. Because we have a bunch of brain dead Negroes who are desperate for the validation and attention of their white daddy. So what is black conservatism? And why do black folk think that black conservatives believe that their brand of conservatism is the same as white conservatism? First off, let's define black conservatism. And black conservatism is a political and social philosophy held by most, believe it or not, by most in the black community that emphasizes values like personal responsibility, self-reliance, economic empowerment, and moral order. It sounds a lot like the good old white boy conservatism, right? Kinda. But black conservatism stems from a deep-rooted desire to dislodge itself and move forward from within, focusing on traditional family values, faith, with our faith is a little bit different, and a commitment to working hard despite the barriers. Black conservatism is it's a mindset that says, look, we've been done dirty, but we're not waiting around for anyone to fix it. We're going to take control of our own destiny. The spirit of black conservatism is very different than white conservatism. But let's be clear, black conservatism just didn't come out of nowhere. It has historical roots too, and in many ways, a reaction to both the long history of being done dirty in this country and the failures of other political movements that failed to do anything meaningful to address the issues and needs of black people. Booker T. Washington, who was all about self-help and the idea that black people could gain respect by success by building their own institutions and businesses.